They told her she was invisible. They told her she was expired goods, a boring housewife with nothing to offer. So when Caroline signed the divorce papers, she did not scream. She did not cry. She did not ask for a single dollar of his fortune. Her billionaire husband laughed. His 26-year-old mistress smirked. His lawyers shook their heads. She was 7 months pregnant. She had $4,000 to her name, and she walked out of that building with nothing. He thought he had won. He was dead wrong. Because 3 months later, at the most exclusive gala of the year, 500 of the richest people in America stopped breathing. A matte black private jet rolled up to the red carpet. The doors opened, and the woman who stepped out was not the broken ex-wife they remembered. She was wearing vintage diamonds. She was holding a billionaire's hand, and in her pocket, she carried the one thing that could destroy her ex-husband's entire empire in exactly 43 minutes. He had no idea that the code running his company, every truck, every ship, every dollar, belonged to her. He had no idea that the woman he called invisible had just become the most dangerous person in the room, and the countdown had already started. This is not just a story. This is a warning to every person who has ever looked at someone and seen nothing. Because the people who underestimate you are the ones who should be afraid. Lesson and value. Before we begin, here's what this story will give you. It is not just entertainment. It is a reminder that your silence is not your weakness, that your patience is not your surrender, that the work you do when nobody is watching is the foundation that no one can take from you. If you have ever felt unseen, unvalued, or thrown away, this story is for you. And by the end, you will never look at the quiet person in the room the same way again. If this story stayed with you, if it made your heart race, or gave you chills, or reminded you of your own strength, then do me a small favor. Hit that like button. It costs you nothing, but it tells the algorithm to share this story with someone else who needs to hear it today. Drop a comment and tell me, what would you have done? Would you have taken the money and walked away? Or would you have waited for the perfect moment like Caroline did? I read every single comment, and your answers always surprise me. And if you are not subscribed yet, tap that subscribe button and ring the bell so you never miss a story. We have an even wilder one coming next week about a cheating husband who found out too late that his wife owned the lottery ticket. Trust me, you do not want to miss that one. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. And remember, know your worth, protect your work, and never let anyone call you invisible. They told her she was invisible. They told her she was nothing without his name, his money, his world. And when Carolyn Mitchell sat down to sign her divorce papers on a freezing Tuesday morning in Manhattan, she did not scream. She did not cry. She did not beg for a single dollar of Grant Sterling's fortune. He thought he had won. He thought he had discarded a boring, pregnant housewife for a younger, flashier model. He was wrong. 3 months later, at the most important gala of the decade, 500 of the wealthiest people in America were not looking at Grant Sterling. They were looking at the sky. Because when a matte black Gulfstream G650 landed on the private airstrip and the doors opened, the woman who stepped out was not the broken ex-wife they remembered. She was 7 months pregnant. She was wearing midnight blue velvet and vintage Cartier diamonds, and she was holding the deed to their entire future. This is the story of the ultimate silence before the storm. The conference room on the 42nd floor of the Sterling Global building smelled like lemon polish and expensive cologne. Specifically, it smelled like Santal 33, the fragrance Grant had started wearing 3 months ago, right around the same time he started working late with his new VP of Marketing, Megan Hale. Caroline sat on one side of the mahogany table. Her hands were folded in her lap, resting gently on the curve of her 4-month pregnant belly. She was wearing a simple gray cardigan and jeans. No jewelry, no makeup, no lawyer. Across from her sat Grant Sterling, looking every inch the master of the universe, in a bespoke navy suit that cost more than most people's monthly rent. He was scrolling through emails on his phone, not even bothering to look at her. Beside him sat his attorney, Mr. Whitfield, a silver-haired man with the moral flexibility of a carnival contortionist. "The terms are standard, Caroline," Grant said, still not looking up from his phone. "You get the lake house, the Audi, and a monthly stipend for 5 years. It is generous considering you have not worked a real day in a decade." Mr. Whitfield slid the stack of papers across the table with the practiced efficiency of a man who had ended hundreds of marriages before lunch. "Sign here, Mrs. Sterling, and here, and initial the bottom of page 4. Caroline did not reach up for the pen immediately. She looked at Grant. She looked at the man she had supported for 12 years. She had edited his business proposals when he was a nobody working out of their basement apartment in Brooklyn. She had used her own inheritance, $47,000 from her grandmother, to seed his first startup when every bank in New York laughed him out of the room. She had hosted the dinners, charmed the investors, smoothed over his legendary temper tantrums, and written the proprietary logistics algorithm that now powered his entire empire. That last part was the one Grant always forgot to mention. "Where is Megan?" Caroline asked softly. Grant sighed, finally putting his phone down with the exaggerated patience of a man who believed he was being deeply reasonable. "Do not start, Caroline. Megan is in her office, working. Unlike some people, she has a company to help run. She is 26, Grant. She was an intern 6 months ago." "She understands the future," Grant snapped, his voice echoing off the glass walls. "Look, Caroline, we grew apart. It happens. You are simple. You like gardening and books and baking cookies. I am building an empire. I need a partner who looks the part, who fits the brand. You are just—" He waved his hand at her gray cardigan, vaguely. "You are invisible. Invisible." The word hung in the air, like smoke from a fire that had been burning for years. Caroline picked up the pen. "I do not want the lake house," she said. Her voice was steady, quiet, but something in it made Mr. Whitfield look up from his papers. "Excuse me? I do not want the lake house. I do not want the Audi, and I certainly do not want your stipend, Grant." Grant let out a laugh that was more bark than amusement. "Okay, playing the martyr. Fine. What do you want then? The penthouse? Stock options? You are not getting equity, Caroline. My lawyers made sure of that." "I want nothing," Caroline said. She flipped to the back page. "I want a clean break. No alimony, no assets, just my freedom. And I want to keep my maiden name, effective immediately." Grant looked at his lawyer, confused. "She can do that?" "If she waives all marital rights, certainly," Whitfield said, eyeing Caroline with the suspicion of a man who had never seen anyone leave money on the table voluntarily. "But Mrs. Sterling, you do realize this leaves you with virtually nothing. You have been out of the workforce for years. You are 4 months pregnant. How do you plan to support yourself?" "I will figure it out," Caroline said. What Grant did not know, what nobody in that room knew, was that Caroline had spent the last year quietly meeting with intellectual property attorneys. 5 years ago, she had legally separated her grandmother's trust from Grant's assets. And the algorithm she had written in 2014, the one that routed every shipment, optimized every supply chain, and powered the digital backbone of Sterling Global, had never been formally transferred to the company. It was a verbal agreement between spouses, nothing more. The IP waiver Grant was about to sign would release all claims to Mitchell Intellectual Property Holdings. He did not read it. He never read anything she gave him. Caroline pressed the pen to the paper and signed, Caroline Mitchell. The sound of the pen scratching against paper was the only noise in the room. She stood up, leaving her copy of the contract on the table. She did not need it. She had photographed every page 6 months ago. "You are making a mistake," Grant called out as she walked toward the glass doors. "You are going to come crawling back in a month when you realize the real world eats women like you alive." Carolyn paused at the door. She did not turn around. "You are right about one thing, Grant. The world has changed, but you are the one who forgot to read the fine print." She walked out. The glass doors closed behind her with a soft click that sounded, to Grant, like nothing at all. To Caroline, it sounded like the first note of a symphony she had been composing for a very long time. As she stepped into the elevator, she saw Megan Hale waiting in the lobby. Megan was wearing a bright red dress that was aggressively inappropriate for 9 in the morning, holding 2 coffees from the expensive place downstairs, performing the role of the new woman with the enthusiasm of an understudy who had finally gotten her big break. "Oh, Caroline," Megan chirped, her smile sharp enough to cut glass. "Leaving so soon? Grant and I were hoping you would be reasonable about the furniture. There are a few pieces in the penthouse that would really complete the living room redesign I have been planning." Caroline looked at the girl. She saw the ambition, the arrogance, and underneath it all, the desperate insecurity of someone who had confused proximity to power with actually having it. "He is all yours, Megan. Check his pockets. He tends to lose things, like his integrity." Then Caroline Mitchell walked out of the Sterling Global building and into the cold January streets of New York City. It was raining. She pulled her coat tighter around her belly, walked 2 blocks to a bus stop, and waited. No black sedan, no private car, just a pregnant woman standing in the rain, holding a bag with everything she owned that mattered, which was not much at all. The bus came. She got on. She found a seat near the back, and as Manhattan's skyline disappeared behind her, through the rain-streaked window, Caroline Mitchell allowed herself exactly 30 seconds to feel the full weight of what she had just done. Then she pulled out her phone and opened a message she had drafted 3 days ago to a number she had not used in 15 years. "It is done," the message read. "He signed everything. He has no idea." She pressed send. Here is something every woman should know, and it is something they do not teach you in school, or whisper to you at your wedding, or print on the motivational posters in the break room at work. Before you sign anything in a divorce, make sure you understand what you own, not what he gave you, what was always yours: intellectual property, creative work, investments made before the marriage. A $200 consultation with an IP lawyer can be worth more than any alimony check you will ever receive. Caroline knew this. She had prepared for this. But knowing you are doing the right thing and actually living through the consequences of it are 2 very different experiences, and the 2 weeks following her divorce nearly destroyed her. The apartment in Queens was a 4th-floor walk-up with a radiator that clanked like a ghost with a grudge and a window that looked out onto a brick wall. Caroline stood in the middle of the empty living room, surrounded by 6 boxes that contained everything she had taken from 12 years of marriage: clothes, a few books, her laptop, the external hard drive containing every line of code she had ever written. She had $4,200 in her checking account. Her grandmother's trust existed, but it was frozen in legal transition, and the lawyers said it could take 8 to 12 weeks to clear. Her health insurance had been on Grant's plan, and as of 10 that morning, she was no longer covered. She was 4 months pregnant. She did not have a job. She did not have a doctor. She did not have a plan for dinner. She sat down on the floor because there was no furniture, and she cried. She cried for 20 minutes straight, ugly sobs that echoed off the bare walls, and then she stopped. She wiped her face with the sleeve of her gray cardigan. She pulled out her laptop, and she started looking for freelance coding jobs. That was Monday. By Wednesday, Grant's public relations team had planted their first story. It appeared in 3 tabloids simultaneously, which meant it was coordinated, which meant Grant had paid for it. The headline read, "Sterling CEO's sad ex-wife spotted in Queens walk-up." The photos were grainy but recognizable. Caroline carrying grocery bags, looking exhausted. Caroline climbing the stairs to her building, one hand on her belly, the other gripping the railing. The angle was chosen to make her look as pathetic as possible. The comment section was exactly what you would expect from the internet at its cruelest. "She gave up millions? She is insane. No wonder he left. She let herself go. Who leaves a billionaire voluntarily? She must be crazy. Pregnant and broke in Queens? That is what happens when you do not fight for what is yours." Caroline made the mistake of reading them. She read every single one, sitting on the floor of her empty apartment at 2 in the morning, her laptop balanced on a moving box, and each comment was a small, sharp knife. Her phone buzzed constantly that first week, but not with support. It buzzed with silence. The friends she and Grant had shared, the wives of his business partners, the women she had hosted dinners for and bought birthday gifts for and listened to cry about their own marriages, they disappeared one by one. The dinner invitations stopped. The group texts went quiet. One woman, Barbara, the wife of Grant's COO, actually texted Caroline to say she was sorry, but she could not be seen associating with her right now because it might affect her husband's position. Caroline deleted the text. Then she deleted Barbara's number. Then she sat in the dark and wondered if she had made a terrible mistake. On Friday, she went to her OBGYN appointment. She had found a community clinic that accepted patients without insurance, and the waiting room was crowded and loud and smelled like hand sanitizer. The doctor was kind but busy. She took Caroline's blood pressure and frowned. "This is high," the doctor said. "Stress-related, I would guess." "You need to take care of yourself, Mrs. Sterling. Your baby needs you calm." "It is Mitchell," Caroline said quietly, "and I am trying." She walked home from the clinic because she could not afford the bus and the groceries she needed. It was January in New York, and the wind cut through her coat like it had a personal vendetta. She climbed the 4 flights of stairs slowly, one hand on the railing, the other on her belly, feeling the baby kick with each step. And she thought about Grant in his heated penthouse, with his 26-year-old girlfriend and his $60 million company, and she felt something she had not allowed herself to feel in 12 years. Rage. Not the hot, explosive kind, the cold kind. The kind that sits in your chest like a block of ice and does not melt. The kind that makes you sharper instead of weaker. The kind that whispers, "Remember this feeling, because you are going to need it." She reached her apartment door, fumbled with the keys, and pushed it open. The apartment was dark, but it was not empty. There was a suitcase in the hallway. 2 suitcases, actually. And the smell of something warm and savory was coming from the kitchen. Diane Mitchell, Caroline's mother, was standing at the stove in the tiny kitchen, wearing an apron she had apparently brought from home, stirring a casserole in a pot that was too big for the burner. Diane was 62 years old, a retired schoolteacher from Richmond, Virginia, with silver-streaked hair and the kind of no-nonsense Southern demeanor that could make a grown man apologize for things he had not even done yet. "Baby girl," Diane said, without turning around, "are you standing in the doorway with your mouth open, or are you going to come eat? Mama, what are you doing here?" What does it look like? I am making dinner, and I am moving it in. Temporarily, she added, pointing the wooden spoon at Caroline for emphasis. Do not get any ideas about this being permanent. I have a book club in Richmond, and they cannot function without me. You drove 6 hours. 7, actually. There was construction on 95. Now sit down. You look like you have not eaten a real meal in a week. Caroline sat. She did not have the energy to argue. Diane set a bowl in front of her and sat down across the small folding table that served as the kitchen's only surface. Now, Diane said, folding her hands, tell me everything, and I mean everything, Caroline. Not the cleaned-up version you would tell a stranger, the real one. So Caroline told her. About the divorce, about the money, about the tabloids, about Barbara's text, about the clinic, about the blood pressure, about the $4,200 and the frozen trust and the freelance jobs that paid $40 for 8 hours of work. Diane listened to all of it without interrupting. When Caroline was finished, Diane was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, Are you done feeling sorry for yourself? Caroline blinked. What? I asked if you were done. Because you have tonight, baby girl. You have tonight to sit in this tiny apartment and cry and eat this casserole and feel the full weight of everything that man did to you. But tomorrow morning, we fight. Do you hear me? Tomorrow, we figure out the insurance. We figure out the trust. We figure out the plan. Because you are Caroline Mitchell, and you wrote the code that runs that man's entire company, and if he is too stupid to realize that, then the trash took itself out. Our job is to make sure it stays at the curb. Caroline stared at her mother. Then, for the first time in 2 weeks, she laughed. It was a small, broken laugh, but it was real. Mama, this neighborhood is not great. Diane waved her hand dismissively. This neighborhood has character, and by character, I mean that man on the corner offered to sell me a genuine Rolex for $40. I told him I would take 2 if he threw in a handbag. He respected my negotiating skills. Caroline laughed again, harder this time. Now eat, Diane commanded. My grandbaby needs nutrition even if you have decided to survive on sadness and tap water. Caroline ate. The casserole was perfect. And for the first time since she had walked out of the Sterling Global building, she felt something other than fear. She felt the ice in her chest shift, not melt, sharpen. 2 weeks after Diane moved in, Caroline's life began to find a rhythm. It was not a comfortable rhythm. It was the rhythm of survival, the kind that is exhausting and repetitive and occasionally humiliating. But it was forward motion, and forward motion was enough. Diane handled the apartment with the organizational ferocity of a retired school teacher who had once managed 30 second graders and a science fair simultaneously. She found a free clinic 2 neighborhoods over that had a prenatal program. She negotiated with the landlord to fix the radiator, a conversation that apparently involved implied threats about building code violations and explicit threats about calling the landlord's mother, whom Diane had somehow identified and befriended at the grocery store within 3 days of moving in. Caroline coded. She sat at the folding table in the kitchen from 6 in the morning until midnight, her laptop humming, her belly growing, taking every freelance job she could find. Data cleaning for a startup in Austin, algorithm optimization for a logistics company in Singapore, a debugging project for a university research team in Chicago. The pay was terrible, $40 here, $60 there. Occasionally, someone would pay her $200 for a project that should have cost $5,000, and she would take it because $200 was the difference between buying groceries and not. At night, when Diane was asleep and the apartment was quiet, except for the clanking radiator and the distant sound of sirens, Caroline would sit in the dark and work on her real project, the one she had been building in her head for 5 years. It was 2:17 in the morning, on a Tuesday, when her phone buzzed with a LinkedIn notification. Caroline almost ignored it. LinkedIn notifications at 2 in the morning were usually spam or recruiters looking for someone with her skills who would work for a fraction of what they were worth, which was the same thing. But this one was different. The message was from Nate Cordero. Caroline stared at the name for a long time. Nate Cordero. She had not heard that name in 15 years, but she recognized it immediately, the way you recognize the melody of a song you loved in college, even when you have not heard it in decades. They had met at a coding boot camp in San Francisco in 2009. Caroline was 20 and Nate was 29, and they were the two people in the program who actually understood recursive algorithms and could explain them to each other without condescension. They had spent 3 months building projects together, drinking terrible coffee, arguing about encryption protocols with the kind of passionate intensity that other people reserved for politics or sports. Then the boot camp ended. Caroline moved to New York. She met Grant at a networking event. Grant was handsome and charming and talked about building an empire, and Caroline, who had grown up in a modest house in Richmond with a school teacher mother and a father who had left when she was 7, was dazzled by the ambition, the confidence, the sheer gravitational pull of a man who believed the world owed him something and intended to collect. She married Grant. She disappeared into his world, and she lost touch with Nate Cordero. Now, 15 years later, his message glowed on her phone screen in the dark apartment. I saw the article. It read, "I know it is not the full story. It never is with those tabloid pieces. If you ever want to talk about code, not drama, I am around. No pressure. Just one old boot camp friend to another." Caroline read the message 3 times. She almost did not respond. The last thing she needed was another complication, another person in her life who might disappoint her or use her or see her as a project to fix. But the message did not say any of those things. It said code, not drama. It said no pressure. It said, friend. She typed a response. "Thank you, Nate. It has been a long time. I could use a conversation about something other than my own disaster." She pressed send. Then she went back to coding. The baby kicked. They started talking. Not every day, not intensely, but regularly, and always about work. Nate, it turned out, had done well for himself. Extremely well. He had built a venture capital firm that specialized in infrastructure technology, and he had a particular interest in autonomous logistics. He had made his first billion by the time he was 38, and he had done it quietly, without the magazine covers or the galas or the desperate need for public adoration that characterized men like Grant. What struck Caroline most was not his wealth. It was the way he talked to her. He asked questions about her code and then listened to the answers. He disagreed with her about encryption protocols and said, "Here is why I think you are wrong," instead of "do not worry about it," or "that is too technical for this conversation." He treated her like an equal, not because he was performing equality, but because he genuinely believed she was his intellectual peer. For the first time in 12 years, Caroline felt like someone saw her brain, not her role. 3 weeks into their conversations, Nate mentioned something casually that changed everything. "I have been quietly acquiring shipping lane contracts in the Pacific through a holding company," he said. "We have the infrastructure, but we need a logistics algorithm that can optimize autonomous routing in real time. Every system we have tested crashes when you scale past 10,000 concurrent shipments." Caroline was quiet for a long moment. "Nate," she said. I wrote an algorithm that can handle 200,000 concurrent shipments. He paused. You what? In 2014? In my basement in Brooklyn. It was supposed to be the backbone of Grant's first startup. I wrote every line of code myself. Grant took credit for it, and I let him because I loved him and because I thought that was what good wives did. Another pause. Does he own the IP? No. Caroline smiled in the dark apartment, and it was not a sad smile. It was the first real smile she had worn in months. He signed a waiver in the divorce. He released all claims to Mitchell Intellectual Property Holdings. He did not read it. Caroline, Nate said slowly, do you understand what you are sitting on? Yes, I have understood for 5 years. I was just waiting for the right moment. When your world falls apart, do not look for a savior. Look for the people who saw your value before someone else told them not to. Your old network, the colleagues and classmates and mentors from before, they remember who you actually are, not the role someone else assigned you, not the identity you wore like a costume for someone else's benefit. They remember the person underneath. And sometimes, at 2 a.m. in a dark apartment in Queens, that is exactly the lifeline you need. Within a week, Caroline and Nate had formed a partnership, 50-50, everything documented, everything legal. She was not a charity case. She was not a damsel he was rescuing. She was the co-architect, and the company they were building, a shell corporation called the Obsidian Group, was hers as much as his. Diane watched all of this from the kitchen, where she had installed herself as the unofficial chief operations officer of Caroline's new life. She did not understand the code. She did not understand the corporate structures, but she understood the look on her daughter's face when she talked about the algorithm, and she understood that it was the first time in 12 years that Caroline looked like herself. I do not understand a word of what you are doing, Diane said, one evening, watching Caroline type furiously on her laptop. But I can tell by the look on your face that somebody is about to have a very bad day. The worst day of his life, Mama. Good. Now go to bed. My grandbaby needs sleep, even if you do not. The next 6 weeks moved fast. Obsidian Group began acquiring logistics infrastructure across the Pacific Rim through a series of shell companies and holding firms that were designed to be untraceable to anyone who was not specifically looking. Nate handled the acquisitions. Caroline handled the technology. Together, they were building a machine that would, at the right moment, give them leverage over every major shipping route in the Western Hemisphere. But the real weapon was not the company. The real weapon was the code. Caroline's algorithm, the one she had written in 2014 in a basement apartment in Brooklyn, while Grant was out drinking with potential investors, was not just a logistics optimization program. It was the kind of generational breakthrough that comes along once in a decade. The algorithm could process 200,000 concurrent shipping routes in real time, predict bottlenecks before they formed, reroute cargo around disruptions with near zero latency, and do all of it with an encryption layer so sophisticated that it had attracted the attention of people far more powerful than Grant Sterling. 2 months after the divorce, Caroline found herself sitting in a windowless room in a government building in Washington, D.C., across from 3 people in dark suits who did not smile. Miss Mitchell, the woman in the center said, we have been monitoring the Obsidian Group's technology capabilities. Your encryption algorithm has applications beyond commercial logistics. Specifically, we believe it is the only system currently capable of securing the Navy's autonomous supply drone program. Caroline sat very still. Beside her, Nate was equally motionless. We would like to offer a contract, the woman continued, $400 million for exclusive government licensing rights. In exchange, we would require certain security clearances and, she paused, our full cooperation in ensuring the technology does not fall into the wrong hands. Caroline looked at Nate. He gave the smallest nod. She looked back at the woman. I have conditions, Caroline said. The woman raised an eyebrow. You are negotiating with the Department of Defense, Miss Mitchell. I am negotiating with a customer, Caroline replied, and my conditions are simple. I retain ownership of the base code. The license is renewable, not permanent, and my name goes on the patent. Not a corporation, not a holding company. My name, Caroline Mitchell. The woman studied her for a long moment. Then she smiled, just barely. I think we can work with that. Back in New York, Caroline sat in her Queens apartment with Diane and Nate, the contract signed, the $400 million deposit processing, and she felt something she had not felt in 12 years. Certainty. Now came the final piece. The algorithm that powered Sterling Global, the one that routed their shipments, managed their supply chain, and generated their quarterly profits, ran on Caroline's code. It always had. And the license for that code had been a spousal courtesy, an informal, unwritten agreement that existed only because Caroline and Grant were married. They were not married anymore. And the IP waiver Grant had signed, the one he had not read because he was too busy texting Megan under the table, explicitly released all claims to Mitchell Intellectual Property Holdings, which meant the license could expire, and Caroline could set the date. She set it for midnight on the night of the Sterling Gala, the biggest event of Grant's year, the night he would parade his success in front of 500 of the wealthiest and most powerful people in America. But she did not just set a kill switch. She built a coffin, hidden inside the routine software update that Grant's IT team had authorized without reading, because nobody at Sterling Global ever read anything. Caroline embedded an automatic audit protocol. When the system rebooted, it would not just shut down the servers. It would scan every transaction from the last 3 months and display the results on whatever screen was connected to the main network. Every transaction, every rerouted shipment, every compliance violation, every dirty shortcut Grant and Megan had taken when they fired the oversight team to save money for their party. You are building a bomb, Nate said quietly, watching her code. No, Caroline said. I am building a mirror. I am going to show him exactly what he built when nobody was watching. And the password? Nate asked. Caroline typed a single word on the screen and smiled. The word was invisible. The gold-embossed invitation arrived on a Tuesday, forwarded from Caroline's Queens address by the building's elderly mailman, who had become surprisingly invested in her story after Diane befriended him with homemade cornbread. The card was heavy, expensive, printed on cream stock with gold lettering. The Sterling Gala, black tie only, the Hamptons. Megan had sent it. Caroline knew this because the handwritten note, tucked inside, said, Thought you might want to see what you are missing. Dress code is formal, so you might want to borrow something. Signed with a little heart. Diane read the note and made a sound that was somewhere between a laugh and a war cry. That little, Diane started. Mama. I was going to say that little biscuit, Diane said innocently. No, you were not. No, Diane agreed. I was not. Everything was in place. The algorithm would expire at midnight on the night of the gala. The Obsidian Group owned the leverage. The stage was set. Caroline had even arranged for a custom gown, a gift from a designer friend of Nate's in Paris, midnight blue velvet, cut to accommodate her 7-month belly. Because if you are going to dismantle a man's empire, you should look magnificent while doing it. And then, the day before the gala, everything fell apart. Caroline's IP lawyer called at 7 in the morning. Her voice was tight, the kind of tight that means someone has been awake all night researching and has not found an answer they like. Caroline, we have a problem. Grant's legal team filed an emergency motion this morning in New York State Court. They are claiming the algorithm was created during the marriage and constitutes marital property regardless of the waiver. Caroline's blood went cold. How? We were careful. Nobody knew about the timeline. Someone talked. Someone close to you. The filing references your coding project specifically. They know you have been working on something. Caroline sank into the kitchen chair. Her mind raced. She had been careful, obsessively careful. She had told almost no one. Nate knew. Diane knew. Her lawyer knew. And Patricia Walsh, her college roommate, her oldest friend, the woman she had called 3 weeks ago in a moment of weakness, needing to hear a friendly voice, needing to tell someone that she was not just surviving, but building something extraordinary. Patricia, who is now dating Tom Brennan, Grant's CFO. "Oh no," Caroline whispered. Patricia had not meant to betray her. Caroline was certain of that. Patricia was not malicious. She was careless. She had probably mentioned it at dinner, casually. The way you mention a friend's project when you are making conversation with your new boyfriend. And Tom, who was loyal to Grant the way dogs are loyal to whoever feeds them, had connected the dots and picked up the phone. "If the judge grants a temporary restraining order," the lawyer continued, "you cannot activate the kill switch. The entire plan is dead. And once they refile in the correct jurisdiction, which they will figure out within 48 hours, the window closes permanently." Caroline sat in the kitchen, 7 months pregnant, betrayed by a friend, legally cornered, 24 hours before the most important night of her life. The casserole Diane had made that morning sat untouched on the counter. "So what are we going to do?" Diane asked from the doorway. She had been listening. Diane always listened. "I do not know, Mama. I really do not know." Diane sat down across from her. She poured 2 cups of tea from the pot she kept permanently warm on the stove. She slid one across the table. "Well, I do," Diane said. "You are going to call Nate. You're going to put on your thinking cap. And you are going to find another door. Because when God closes a window, sometimes you just have to kick down the wall." "That is not how the saying goes, Mama. I improved it." Caroline called Nate. She told him everything. There was a long silence on the line. The kind of silence that could mean defeat or could mean someone very smart was thinking very fast. Then Nate said, "They filed in New York State Court?" "Yes." "Your IP is registered in Delaware?" "Yes, but they could refile." "They could, but they filed the emergency motion in the wrong jurisdiction. It is procedurally invalid. A New York State judge cannot grant a TRO on Delaware registered intellectual property without first transferring venue. That takes a minimum of 72 hours. Caroline felt the ice in her chest crack. Not break. Crack. "So, we have a window," she said. "We have one night," Nate replied. "The Gala. After that, they refile correctly and we are locked out. Whatever we are going to do, we do it tomorrow night, or we do not do it at all." Caroline looked at Diane. Diane looked back at her with the steady, fierce expression of a woman who had raised a daughter alone and was not about to let that daughter's work be stolen by a man in an expensive suit. "We go tomorrow night," Caroline said. "That is my girl," Diane said. "Now eat your breakfast. You are going to need your strength." The venue was an exclusive, private airfield in the Hamptons that Grant had rented and converted into a crystal ballroom. He had spent $1.2 million on the transformation, which was ironic given that he had fired his entire compliance team 2 months earlier to save money. The hangar glittered with crystal chandeliers. silk drapery, ice sculptures shaped like the Sterling Global logo, and the nervous energy of 500 people who had paid $10,000 a plate to eat tiny food and tell Grant Sterling how wonderful he was. Private jets were parked on the tarmac as backdrops for photographs, a display of excess that bordered on parody. Paparazzi lined the red carpet. Camera flashes popped like fireworks. Grant and Megan were working the line, and Megan was radiating the kind of aggressive glamour that only deep insecurity can produce. She wore a gold-sequined dress that left very little to the imagination and even less to good taste. Her smile was blinding and completely empty. "Mr. Sterling? Mr. Sterling!" a reporter yelled. "Is it true Sterling Logistics is looking to acquire the Asian shipping markets?" "We are always expanding," Grant beamed, flashing the veneers he had gotten last month. "Nothing can stop Sterling Global." Behind them, inside the hangar, the party was already in full swing. Champagne was flowing. The governor was there. Silicon Valley heavyweights were there. Victoria Ashford, the grande dame of New York philanthropy, who hosted the event every year, was holding court near the ice sculpture, offering compliments that were 50% kindness and 50% threat. Then, the ground began to vibrate. It was not the bass from the DJ. It was not the catering trucks. It was a turbine engine, and it was getting louder. The crowd on the carpet fell quiet. Heads turned. Phones came up. Something was approaching from the east end of the runway, and it was not slowing down. "Is someone else arriving?" Megan asked, annoyed. She adjusted her hair, which the wind from the approaching aircraft was already disturbing. Everyone was supposed to be here by 8. "Probably late arrivals," Grant said, waving it off. "Maybe some tech guy trying to make an entrance," but it was not a normal landing. A sleek matte black Gulfstream G650, one of the most expensive private jets in the world, taxied slowly and deliberately toward the red carpet. It did not park in the background with the other jets. It rolled right up to the velvet ropes, the engines whining to a halt, the thrust blowing Megan's carefully sprayed hair into a spectacular mess. The insignia on the tail was not a standard registration number. It was a stylized silver phoenix. "Who the hell is that?" Grant muttered. "Security. Tell them to move that plane." Before security could move, the stairs lowered. The paparazzi went absolutely silent, which is something paparazzi almost never do because paparazzi are paid to make noise. But there was something about this moment that demanded silence, the way a church goes quiet before the sermon, the way an audience holds its breath before the curtain rises. First, a pair of black heels stepped onto the tarmac. Then a dress of deep, midnight blue velvet appeared, custom cut to accommodate a beautiful 7-month pregnant belly, elegant and commanding, the kind of dress that does not try to be noticed because it does not have to try. Diamonds glittered at the throat, real diamonds, heavy vintage, Cartier diamonds that caught the camera flashes and threw them back like stars. Caroline Mitchell stepped out of the jet and paused at the top of the stairs. She was not slouching. She was not hiding. She was radiant, the kind of radiant that has nothing to do with makeup or lighting and everything to do with a woman who knows exactly who she is and exactly what she is about to do. A gasp rippled through the crowd. Is that his ex-wife?" Someone whispered, loud enough for the microphones to catch. "No way," another replied. "She looks like she owns the place." Then a hand appeared from inside the jet. A man stepped out, tall, silver-streaked black hair, tuxedo that fit like it had been sewn onto his body. He moved with the quiet confidence of someone who had nothing to prove and everything to offer. He took Caroline's hand, lifted it to his lips, and kissed her knuckles. Then he guided her down the stairs like she was the only person in the world. "That is Nate Cordero," someone hissed. The billionaire investor. He never goes to public events. Are they together? Look at the way he is looking at her. Grant Sterling's jaw dropped. He literally stopped breathing. The color drained from his face so fast it was almost medically concerning. Beside him, Megan gripped his arm so hard her acrylic nails punctured the fabric of his suit. Caroline and Nate walked down the red carpet, ignoring the press, ignoring the cameras, heading straight for Grant. The crowd parted like water before a ship. Caroline stopped 3 feet away from her ex-husband. She looked at Megan. She looked at Grant. She did not smile. She did not look angry. She looked bored, the way you look at a restaurant menu when nothing appeals to you. "Hello, Grant," Caroline said. Her voice was smooth, confident, and carried perfectly in the silence. "You sent the invite. I assumed you wanted to meet the new owner of your supply chain." Grant blinked. Sweat appeared instantly on his forehead. "What are you talking about?" Nate stepped forward. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. He was the kind of man whose whisper carried more weight than other men's shouts. "She means, Mr. Sterling, that we have a great deal to discuss before midnight. Shall we go inside?" The inside of the hangar was a kaleidoscope of crystal, silk, and the desperate energy of 500 people who had paid enormous sums of money to be seen in the right place at the right time. The air smelled of expensive catering, champagne, and the faint chemical tang of dry ice from the fog machines Grant had insisted on because he thought they were cinematic. When Caroline and Nate entered the main ballroom, the room did not just go quiet. It shifted. The gravity of the party, which had been centered on Grant Sterling and his gold, sequined girlfriend for the past hour, swung toward them like a compass needle finding north. Richard Ames, the CEO of a major shipping rival, was the first to approach. "Miss Mitchell," he said, extending his hand with genuine warmth, "I have heard extraordinary things about the Obsidian Group. Sebastian told me. I mean, Nate told me you are the architect." Then Senator Bradley appeared. Then Victoria Ashford herself, who took Caroline's arm with the proprietary grace of a woman who always knew where the real power in a room was located. Grant watched from the ice sculpture as his biggest investors, the men and women he had courted for years with expensive dinners and golf outings and flattery so thick you could spread it on toast, drifted away from him and toward the pregnant woman in the blue dress. "Breathe," Nate whispered to Caroline as a waiter offered them sparkling water. "They are terrified of you. They are terrified of you," Caroline corrected. "No," Nate said, and his eyes were serious. "I am just money. You are the mystery. Look at them. They're trying to figure out how the housewife became the woman wearing diamonds worth more than this entire building." Across the room, Megan Hale was imploding. Her gold dress, which had felt so triumphant an hour ago, now looked garish compared to Caroline's understated elegance. She downed her third martini in 15 minutes and grabbed 2 of her friends, a pair of influencers she had hired as brand ambassadors, and marched toward Caroline with the strategic subtlety of a woman who has confused aggression with confidence. Caroline was laughing at something Victoria Ashford had said when Megan's voice cut through the conversation like a saw through plywood. Well, Megan said, blasting a fake sympathetic smile that fooled absolutely no one. "I am surprised you actually came, Caroline. I did not think you would be comfortable in a crowd like this. It is a bit above your pay grade, is it not?" The circle of CEOs and philanthropists went silent. It was a direct, classless, shockingly public attack on a pregnant woman, and even in a room full of people who had built their careers on ruthlessness, it was a line too far. Caroline turned slowly. She looked at Megan the way a scientist looks at a specimen under glass, with clinical detachment and mild professional interest. "Hello, Megan," Caroline said calmly. "The party is lovely. although the lighting is a bit harsh for that fabric. Polyester reflects so poorly under fluorescent. Several people in the circle turned away to hide their smiles. Victoria Ashford did not bother hiding hers. "It is custom silk," Megan snapped, her cheeks reddening. "But I would not expect you to know fashion. Tell me, did you blow your entire alimony check on that rental dress? Or did Mr. Cordero pay for it? It is sad, really, trading one man for another just to stay relevant." The room gasped. Attacking a pregnant woman's dignity and accusing her of being a kept woman in front of 500 witnesses was the social equivalent of pulling the pin on a grenade and then holding it. Nate took a step forward, his eyes darkening, but Caroline placed a hand on his chest. She did not need him to fight this battle. She stepped closer to Megan. Her voice was low, but in the perfect silence of the room, it carried to every corner. "Let me clarify a few things," Caroline said. "First, I did not get alimony. I declined it. Every cent. Second, this dress is not a rental. It was made for me by a designer who happens to be a friend. And third, I did not trade one rich man for another. I upgraded my entire life." She paused. The silence was absolute. "You think you won, Megan? You think you stole Grant from me?" Caroline let out a soft laugh, and it was the coldest sound in the room. "I left the door unlocked, Megan. I left the leash on the table. You did not catch a prize. You caught a problem. And judging by the way Grant is sweating over there by the buffet, checking his phone every 30 seconds, I would say the problem is about to become unmanageable." At that exact moment, across the room, Diane Mitchell was holding court at the shrimp table with the senator's wife, loudly narrating the evening. "My daughter? Oh, she is the one in the blue. She is about to do something that is going to make the evening news. But do not worry. She is also due in 2 months, so it will not be too dramatic. Would you pass the cocktail sauce? 10:45 at night." Behind black curtains, in a makeshift office at the back of the hangar, the mood was funeral. Grant's chief technology officer, a brilliant but currently terrified young man named Dave, was typing furiously on a laptop while sweat dripped down his temples. 3 monitors on the folding table showed cascading error messages, each one worse than the last. "What do you mean, access denied?" Grant screamed, slamming his hand on the desk so hard that one of the monitors wobbled. His tie was loose, his jacket was off. The master of the universe was unraveling. "I do not know, Grant," Dave shouted back, his voice cracking. "It is the legacy code, the core logistics kernel. It is locking us out. It started with the Asian servers 45 minutes ago, and now it is spreading to Europe. Our trucks are not getting routing data. Ships are sitting in ports because the digital manifests are encrypting themselves." "Then fix it," Grant roared. "Reboot it. Bypass it. Write new code. Do something." "I cannot," Dave yelled. "The source code has a timestamp signature. It looks like a license expiration." He pointed to the screen with a shaking finger. "Look, it says the user agreement has been terminated." Grant pushed Dave aside and stared at the screen. A single line of text blinked in green against a black background. "License holder, Mitchell Intellectual Property Holdings. Status? Expired." Grant stared at the name. Mitchell. His blood ran cold. Not Sterling, Mitchell. He remembered the conference room 3 months ago. The gray cardigan. The quiet voice. "I want to keep my maiden name immediately. I want a clean break." The asset waiver he had signed without reading, because he wanted to get to lunch with Megan, and because he had never, not once in 12 years, bothered to understand what his wife actually did on that laptop in the basement. "No," Grant whispered. "That is impossible. She is a housewife. She does not know how to code like this." Dave's voice was trembling now. "Grant, whoever wrote this base code 10 years ago, they put a dead man's switch in it. It was dormant the entire time. It was designed to activate only if the license expired, and it just woke up. If we do not get an unlock key by midnight, the database wipes itself. Customer data, shipping routes, financial records. Sterling Global will effectively cease to exist. Grant looked at his watch. 11:02, 58 minutes. He stormed out of the makeshift office, Basimpa, shoving past waiters and guests, who tried to congratulate him on the party. The music was still playing. People were still laughing. They had no idea that the company whose stock they owned, whose quarterly profits they depended on, was 58 minutes from total annihilation. He saw her across the ballroom. She was sitting at a VIP table near the stage, talking with Nate and Senator Bradley. She was sipping sparkling water. She looked calm. She looked untouchable. She looked like a woman who had set a fire and was enjoying the warmth. Grant did not care about the scene anymore. He marched across the ballroom, cutting through conversations, knocking against a waiter carrying a tray of champagne flutes that shattered on the floor. Every head in the room turned. "Caroline," he said, arriving at her table, breathing hard. "We need to talk, now. It is about the company. The servers are crashing. It says your name on the code." Caroline looked up at him. She set her water down with deliberate care. She did not stand. She did not rush. She let the silence build until every person within earshot was leaning in. "Oh, that," Caroline said, her voice as calm as if he had asked about the weather. "Yes, I imagine the license would expire eventually. You really should have treated the developer better. What did you do?" "I did not do anything, Grant. I simply took back what was mine. When we were married, I allowed the company to use my intellectual property, the code I wrote in 2014, as a courtesy, a favor to my husband. But since I am no longer your wife, and since you signed a document explicitly releasing all claims to Mitchell IP, the license has expired." Grant felt the floor tilt beneath him. The champagne in his stomach turned to acid. "You cannot do this. That code runs the whole company." "Then I suppose you should have treated the person who wrote it as something other than invisible," Caroline said. She glanced at her watch. "You have 43 minutes. Here's what nobody tells you about standing up for yourself. There will be a moment after you have done the brave thing, after you have made your move and shown your hand, when the other person hits back harder than you ever imagined. When the crowd you thought was on your side turns. When you stand alone in a room full of people and wonder if everything you built was worth the price you are about to pay. That is the moment that defines everything. Not whether you feel brave, but whether you move forward anyway." Grant's lawyer, Mr. Whitfield, confirmed the nightmare in 60 seconds. "If she owns the copyright and you signed the release, she has us. Even if we sue, the servers wipe at midnight. By the time we get to court, the company is a shell." "How much?" Grant demanded, turning back to Caroline. "How much do you want? $1 million? $5 million? Turn it back on." Caroline stood. She was wearing heels, but even so, it was not her physical height that made Grant feel small. It was everything else. "I do not want your money, Grant. I have my own money now, and I have partners who make your net worth look like a rounding error." "Then what do you want?" "I want you to go up to that stage," Caroline said, her voice low enough that only Grant and the people at the surrounding tables could hear. "I want you to take the microphone, and I want you to tell everyone the truth, not the story about how you built this company from nothing, the truth about who built the technology, who funded the startup, and who you threw away when you thought you were big enough to stand on your own." Grant recoiled like she had struck him. "I cannot do that. It is career suicide." "Then enjoy the bankruptcy." "Tick-tock, Grant." Grant looked around the room. He looked at the countdown on his phone, 41 minutes and falling. He looked at Megan, who was over by the bar taking selfies with her influencer friends, completely oblivious. He looked at the 500 guests who were about to lose millions if the servers wiped. He walked toward the stage. He signaled for the microphone. The lights dimmed. A spotlight hit the podium. Grant Sterling walked up the stairs, looking like a man walking to his own execution. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice cracking against the microphone. "Could I have your attention for a moment?" The crowd quieted. Megan beamed from the front row, assuming this was the speech about record profits. She held up her phone to record. "There is something I need to say about the success of Sterling Global," Grant continued, his hands white-knuckled on the podium, "about how we got here." He looked at Caroline in the back of the room. She was checking her watch. And then Grant Sterling did something that nobody expected. Instead of confessing, he attacked. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his voice suddenly louder, harder, "my ex-wife is trying to extort this company tonight. She has rigged our systems, and she is holding our data hostage. And I want you to know something." He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice carried the venom of a man with nothing left to lose. "That baby she is carrying, I have serious doubts about the paternity. She was spending nights with Nate Cordero before our divorce was even final." The crowd erupted in murmurs. 500 phones came out. The narrative shifted in an instant. Suddenly, Caroline was not the wronged wife. She was the cheater, the extortionist, the woman who had betrayed her husband and was now trying to steal his company with her billionaire boyfriend. Caroline felt the room turn against her. She felt the whispers hit her like physical blows. She felt her blood pressure spike, felt the baby kick hard, felt Nate grip her arm, and Diane stand up from the shrimp table with murder in her eyes. "That man is a liar," Diane started. "Mama," Caroline said, "sit down, please." She stood alone, pregnant, publicly humiliated. The whispers were everywhere. She could see people pulling out their phones, texting, tweeting, sharing. The story was already spreading. Pregnant ex-wife exposed at Gala, paternity questions, extortion attempt. Everything she had built was collapsing, not because of the law, not because of the code, but because of a lie told to 500 people and live-streamed to the world. Caroline closed her eyes. She put her hand on her belly. She felt her daughter move, and then she walked to the stage. She did not grab the microphone. She asked for it, politely, which somehow made the moment more powerful than any dramatic gesture could have. "Grant just questioned the paternity of our child," Caroline said into the microphone. Her voice was steady, barely. "So let me show you who this man really is." She signaled the tech booth. The massive screen behind the stage lit up, and one by one, the evidence appeared. First, time-stamped code commits from 2014. Every single one under Caroline Mitchell's developer credentials. The original algorithm, written years before Sterling Global even existed, with version history and digital signatures that could not be faked. Second, bank records showing Caroline's grandmother's inheritance, $180,000, funding Grant's first startup. Money he never repaid. Money he never even acknowledged. Third, text messages between Grant and Megan, dated 3 months before the divorce was filed. The room went silent as the words appeared on the 60-foot screen. "Do not worry about Caroline. She is clueless. She thinks I still love her." And finally, a paternity test, taken voluntarily 1 month ago. Results certified by an independent laboratory. The baby is Grant's. 99.98% match. "I took the test because I knew you would try this, Grant," Caroline said, looking directly at him. "I know you better than you know yourself. That was always the problem." The room erupted, not in murmurs this time, in outrage. 500 people who had been ready to believe the worst about a pregnant woman 30 seconds ago, now turned on Grant Sterling with the fury of people who realized they had been manipulated. The countdown on the screen behind them hit 3 minutes. Caroline addressed the board of directors, who were huddled near the front table, looking like men who had just watched their retirement accounts catch fire. "You have a choice," Caroline said. "Sign the transfer of 51% voting shares to the Obsidian Group. My code stays active. Your investments are safe. The company survives under new management. Or let the clock run out and explain to your shareholders tomorrow morning why they are bankrupt, because your CEO could not keep his hands off the intern." Grant signed the document with 45 seconds to spare. His hand shook so badly that the signature was barely legible, but it was witnessed by 500 people and live-streamed to the world. Megan screamed at him. "You gave away the company. You are a loser, Grant." She turned and stormed off the stage, moving so fast in her heels that she lost her balance near the dessert table and fell directly into the chocolate fountain. The image, gold sequined dress covered in Belgian chocolate, hair destroyed, mascara running, was photographed by approximately 300 phones simultaneously and became the most shared meme on the internet within 40 minutes. From the shrimp table, Diane's voice cut through the chaos with perfect clarity. "Well, that dress finally found a color that suits it." Caroline walked to the laptop connected to the main projector. The room held its breath. 500 people, a dozen cameras, and one countdown clock with 15 seconds remaining. She typed a single word. The word Grant had used to describe her in the divorce lawyer's office. The word he had thrown at her like it was nothing. The word that had burned in her chest for 3 months, like a coal she could not put out. She typed invisible. She hit enter. The red screen flashed green. System restored. License renewed. Owner. Obsidian Group. The countdown stopped at 05 seconds. The room exhaled as one, and then they began to applaud. Not for Grant Sterling, who stood at the podium looking like a man whose soul had been surgically removed. They applauded for the pregnant woman in the blue dress who had just executed the most spectacular corporate takeover in American history without raising her voice. 6 months later, the morning sun hit the glass facade of the newly renamed Porter Cordero Global Tower in Manhattan. The Sterling sign had been removed on Caroline's first day as CEO. She had it melted down and recycled into paperweights, which she distributed to the interns with a note that read, "Never let anyone else take credit for your work." The corner office on the 42nd floor was unrecognizable. Gone were Grant's leather chairs, the wall of magazine covers, the ostentatious displays of ego. The room was now open and airy, filled with plants and books and the kind of natural light that made you want to think clearly. A photo of Lily, born healthy 3 months ago, sat on the desk next to a cup of coffee that was going cold because Caroline had been staring out the window for 20 minutes. The company had tripled in stock value since the night of the gala. The Department of Defense contract was thriving. The autonomous drone logistics program was ahead of schedule. Porter Cordero Global was not just a success. It was a phenomenon. But Caroline was not celebrating. She was staring at the skyline with an expression that was not triumph. It was something quieter, something harder to name. "You have been staring at that skyline for 20 minutes, Diane said from the doorway. She was carrying 2 coffees and wearing an apron because Diane wore an apron everywhere, including the corner office of a multi-billion-dollar corporation. "What is wrong? You own half of it." "I thought winning would feel different, Mama." "Different how?" Caroline was quiet for a moment. "I thought I would feel happy. I just feel tired and a little sad. I wasted 12 years on someone who could not see me. 12 years of editing his proposals and hosting his dinners and writing his code and pretending that being invisible was the same as being humble. It was not humility, Mama. It was erasure, and I let it happen. Diane set the coffees down. She pulled a chair over and sat across from her daughter, the way she had sat across from her at the tiny folding table in Queens and at the kitchen table in Richmond before that, and at every kitchen table of Caroline's life where something important needed to be said. Baby, you did not waste those years. You survived them, and you learned something most people never learn until it is too late. You learned that your silence is not your weakness. Your silence was just the deep breath before the scream, and when you finally screamed, the whole world heard it. She looked at the photo of Lily on the desk, and you made a whole human being in the process. Two, actually, if you count the company. Caroline smiled. It was small and tired and real. Healing is not a straight line. You can win everything and still mourn the life you thought you were going to have. That is not weakness. That is being human. Give yourself permission to feel all of it. The victory and the grief, the power and the exhaustion, the pride and the sadness. You earned every single one of those feelings. Do not let anyone, not even yourself, tell you that winning means you are not allowed to be tired. The door opened. Nate walked in carrying a newspaper and a bag of bagels, because he had learned early in their partnership that Caroline made better decisions when she had eaten. Have you seen page 6? Nate asked, setting the paper on her desk. Caroline glanced at it. A small, grainy photo showed Grant Sterling in an orange jumpsuit, picking up trash on the side of a highway in New Jersey. The headline read, ex-CEO, Sterling denied bail in federal negligence case. Former mistress turned state witness, Jessica testified against him? Caroline asked. Megan, Nate corrected gently. Saying like a bird, she claimed he forced her to ignore the compliance logs. It did not save her, though. She is facing probation and a lifetime ban from holding any corporate officer position. She is currently trying to sell her story to a reality television show. No network is buying. Caroline looked at the photo of Grant in his jumpsuit. She waited to feel something. Satisfaction. Vindication. The sweet, burning pleasure of revenge. But what she felt was simpler than that. She felt the indifference you feel for a stranger on the street. He was no longer a part of her story. He was a footnote. Then Nate said something that changed everything. There is something else, he said, and his voice had a careful quality to it that Caroline had learned to pay attention to. Tom Brennan, the CFO who flipped, he gave the federal investigators Grant's second set of books. And Grant was laundering money. Through the Sterling Foundation. Caroline went very still. The Sterling Foundation, the children's charity she had co-founded with Grant 8 years ago. The organization that funded pediatric hospitals, after-school programs, literacy initiatives, in underserved communities. The one thing from her marriage that she had believed was genuinely good. The hospitals, Caroline whispered, are fine, Nate said quickly. The donations were real. The programs are funded. It is the source money that is dirty. Grant was using the foundation to clean cash from the unmanifested shipping containers, the ones the compliance team would have caught if he had not fired them. Caroline stared at Nate. Then she stared at the newspaper. Then she stared at the photo of Lily on her desk. She had prepared for many things. She had prepared for the legal battle, the public scrutiny, the corporate warfare. She had not prepared for this. The one good thing she thought she had built with Grant, the one piece of their marriage that she believed was untainted, was rotten underneath. I have to go public, Caroline said. Nate nodded. I know. And it will be hard. Harder than the gala, harder than the divorce. I know. Caroline held a press conference the next morning. She stood behind a podium in front of 100 cameras, and for the first time since this entire saga began, she did not have a script. I did not know, Caroline said. Her voice was steady, but it was the steadiness of someone who is holding themselves together with nothing but willpower and the knowledge that falling apart is not an option. That is not an excuse, it is a fact. And I am here to make it right. She took a breath. The cameras flashed. Porter Cordero Global will replace every dollar of dirty money with clean funds. Every hospital, every program, every scholarship, because the children who benefited from that foundation did not do anything wrong. And neither will my daughter grow up in a world where her mother hid from the truth to protect her own image. The press conference lasted 45 minutes. She answered every question. She did not deflect. She did not blame Grant, even though she could have. She simply told the truth, and the truth, it turned out, was more powerful than any revenge she had ever planned. The story went viral. Not because of drama, not because of the gala or the countdown or the chocolate fountain. It went viral because of honesty. Because in a world saturated with spin and performance and carefully curated narratives, a woman standing in front of cameras and saying I did not know, and I am going to fix it, was the most shocking thing anyone had seen in years. 3 months after the press conference, Porter Cordero Global was named the most ethical company in the logistics industry. The foundation was rebuilt from the ground up with transparent accounting and independent oversight. Lily took her first steps in the same Queen's apartment where Caroline had sat on the floor and cried because Caroline had kept the apartment. She owned the building now, but she lived in the same unit because it reminded her of who she was when she had nothing, and she never wanted to forget that person again. On a Sunday morning in October, the apartment smelled like pancakes. Diane was at the stove, wearing her apron, humming a hymn from Pastor Ray's church. Lily was in her high chair, systematically destroying a banana with the focus and determination of a future CEO. Nate walked in through the front door carrying coffee and the Sunday paper. He had a key now. He had earned it slowly, over months of partnership and late-night conversations about code and life and the strange, beautiful difficulty of building something real with another person. He set the paper on the table. The front page headline read, Porter Cordero Global named Most Ethical Company in Logistics. You are not going to frame that one? Nate asked. Caroline picked up Lily, who immediately grabbed her nose. She looked at the paper. She looked at Nate. She looked at her mother, who was plating pancakes with the efficiency of a woman who had been making breakfast for ungrateful people for 40 years and had never once stopped. No, Caroline said. I am going to eat pancakes with my family. Smart girl, Diane said, setting a plate in front of her. Pancakes before press clippings. That is how I raised you. They ate breakfast together. The sun came through the kitchen window and made patterns on the table. Lily laughed at nothing, the way babies do, and the sound filled the small apartment like music. Caroline Mitchell did not get revenge. She got something better. She got her name back. She got her work back. She got a life she built on her own terms with her own hands on a foundation of truth instead of someone else's lies. She proved that the most dangerous person in any room is not the one shouting the loudest. It is the one sitting quietly in the corner, holding all the keys. And if this story taught you anything, remember this. Know your worth. Protect your work. And never, ever let anyone tell you that you are invisible. Because the people who underestimate you, they are the ones who should be afraid. What would you have done differently? Would you have taken the alimony or walked away clean like Caroline? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one. And if this story gave you chills, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell. Next week, we have an even crazier story about a cheating husband who found out too late who actually owned the lottery ticket. You will not want to miss it. Thanks for watching. This content was carefully researched, developed, and manually edited by our team to deliver meaningful storytelling with real-life lessons. Every character, every twist, and every word was crafted with one purpose: to entertain you while leaving you with something worth remembering. Thank you for supporting original content